It is a hot afternoon and there is a pot roast on your stove. It has been there 2 hours already. The kitchen is warm, the windows are fogged, and the meat is still tough when you push a fork into it. So you do what everyone does. You turn the heat up a little and you wait some more. Come in out of the heat. The kettle is on and there is a chair by the window. I am Clara, and this is Clara's Forgotten Kitchen. In 1950, a magazine put a pot on the counter of more than a third of American homes that would have had that roast falling apart in under an hour. And within 20 years, it was nearly gone. That pot was the pressure cooker, and this is the story of it in 4 parts. Where it came from, which is older than you think, why it works, which is simple physics, how it took over the American kitchen, and then the part everyone asks about, why it vanished. I will get to that last, because it only makes sense once you know the rest. But first, 1 more minute at your stove. Because this is what nobody told you. The heat you turned up is not the problem. Water boils at 212 degrees, and no matter how high you turn the flame, the water in that pot will not get 1 degree hotter. It just boils away faster. Your roast is stuck at 212. So here is the whole idea, in 1 line. A lid that holds the steam lifts the boiling point. Hold on to that sentence, because the rest of this video is just that sentence, proven over and over. Seal the pot so the steam cannot get out, and the pressure inside rises, and the water inside can get hotter than 212 degrees before it boils. The numbers are these. A sealed cooker runs at about 15 pounds of pressure above the air outside, and that lifts the boiling point of water from 212 degrees to about 250. That sounds like a small jump. It is not. Cooking times drop to roughly a third of what an open pot needs. The 3-hour roast becomes about an hour. Put that on a real supper. Dried beans that want 2 hours in an open pot are done in well under 1. A tough cut of beef that wants 3 hours is tender in about 1. The cook is not doing anything different. She is not stirring harder or watching closer. The lid is doing the work. And the lid is doing it by holding steam that every other pot in the kitchen lets go. Here is why a few dozen degrees does so much. The chemistry of cooking, the softening of tough meat, and the breaking down of beans roughly doubles in speed for every 18-degree rise. 250 is about 2 of those jumps above boiling. So the pot runs near 4 times the speed of an open pan at sea level, and steam carries far more heat into food than dry air ever does. And here is what it could not do. Because a pot that only ever works is a pot nobody trusts. It could not brown. Meat cooked in steam comes out gray unless the cook seared it in the open pot first, and the manuals of the day showed exactly that step. It could not crisp, and it did not forgive. 5 minutes too long turned green beans to something closer to soup. Speed cut both ways. Now, where did it come from? Not the 1950s. Not even this century or the one before it. In 1679, a French physicist named Denis Papin stood up in front of the Royal Society in London and showed them a closed iron vessel with a lid screwed down tight. He called it a new digester for softening bones. Papin had worked in London with Robert Boyle, the man whose name is on the gas laws, until that same year. His digester held the steam in until the pressure rose and the boiling point rose with it, and it pulled the fat out of bones and left them brittle enough to grind. It was the pressure cooker, built to make bone meal and cheap broth, in the reign of Charles II. The name tells you what he was after. Digesting, in the language of the day, meant breaking something down by heat and moisture, the way a body breaks down a meal. Papin was not thinking of Sunday dinner. He was thinking of poor kitchens and of waste, of the bones that went out, with the scraps and the broth and the fat still locked inside them. 270 years later, that is still what the pot was for. And here is the part that matters for our story. His earlier models blew up. So Papin added a safety valve of his own design, a weighted lever that lifted and let steam out when the pressure got too high. That little valve is the ancestor of the rocking weight on the lid of every 1950s cooker, and it later helped give the world the steam engine. The danger and the safety were born in the same year. Then, for about 260 years, not much happened in the home kitchen. The idea sat with scientists and factories. It took until the 1930s and one Wisconsin company for the sealed pot to turn into something a woman could lift off a shelf and trust with supper. Which brings us to part 3, how it took over. National Presto Industries brought a cooker they called the Presto to the New York World's Fair in 1939. What made it different was the cover. It locked on with an interlocking design that closed easily, without the clamps and screws that had made the older pots feel like a piece of factory equipment. A woman could twist it shut with one hand. It sold. By the end of 1941, the company was among the largest housewares makers by dollar volume in the leading stores and the leading maker of pressure cookers in the world. Then the war came, and cooker production stopped. Aluminum went to aircraft. The pots waited, and so did the women who wanted them. After 1945, the market exploded, and the housewares historians use exactly that word. At one point, around 20 manufacturers worldwide were making more than 100 different models. Presto claimed it sold more cookers than all the other brands combined, in an industry with 11 other makers. Every one of them wanted the new suburban kitchen. How many homes? In 1950, an article in the New York Times Magazine put a pressure cooker in 37% of American households, more than one kitchen in 3. If you are watching this at the age where your mother kept house in 1950, the odds are better than even that one of these sat in a cupboard you knew. The names were Presto and Miro-Matic, whose pressure pan manuals survive, dated 1951, 52, 54, and 58, and Wherever, advertising an aluminum cooker in 1947. Sears sold cookers that Presto made under its own name. I will not give you a price for any of them because I could not find one I trust, and I would rather say so than guess. Through the 1950s, Presto added a new 6-quart cooker and lighter models stamped from sheet aluminum rather than cast, and then stainless steel ones. Lighter meant cheaper. Cheaper meant more kitchens. Remember that word, stamped, because it comes back in part 4. But first, what it was actually like to use one, because that is the part that gets left out. A 1950s cooker had 4 parts worth knowing. The pot, the lid, with a rubber gasket in a groove around its edge to make the seal, a vent pipe on top of the lid with a weight that sat on it, and an overpressure plug, a small rubber or metal plug set into the lid that would blow out on purpose if everything else failed. The gasket and the plug are still sold as replacement parts today. The weight is the part people remember. On a weighted gauge cooker, the weight sits on the vent, and when the pressure inside reaches the set level, steam lifts it and it rocks, or jiggles, at a steady rhythm. That sound in the kitchen, that ticking, hissing rock, meant supper was underway. The cook did not read a dial. She listened. On many cookers, that weight was really 3 pieces that stacked, and each piece added to the pressure it would hold back before it lifted. Fewer pieces, lower pressure. All 3, the full 15 pounds. A cook chose the pressure by choosing how much metal sat on the vent. No dial, no battery, no setting to drift. Did your family have one of those weighted cookers, and do you remember anyone teaching you which weight or how many pieces to use? I would love to hear that in the comments. Gravity did the measuring, and gravity does not go out of calibration. The other kind had a dial gauge, a round needle that read the pressure, and that one had a catch. A dial can drift. One that reads high means the food inside was cooked at less pressure than the cook thought. The canning authorities today say a dial gauge should be tested every year. A weighted gauge cannot go out of true. The old jiggler, it turns out, was the honest one. What went in it? Tough, cheap cuts of meat, the chuck and the shank and the stew beef that took all afternoon in an open pot, dried beans that would otherwise soak overnight and simmer for hours, potatoes and carrots on a rack above the liquid. The whole promise of the pot was that the cheapest food in the store could be on the table on a weeknight. Think about what that did to the shopping. The cuts that cost the least were the ones with the most connective tissue, the ones that needed long, wet heat to turn tender. In an open pot, that meant an afternoon. In the cooker, it meant an hour. So the pressure cooker did more than save time. It let a household buy the cheapest meat in the case and serve it on a Tuesday without apology. That is a thrift story, and the thrift is the history. I should say this once and then leave it alone. Folks ask where the kitchen ways in these videos are written down, and there is a small book linked below with many of them set out plainly. It is there if you want it, and I will not bring it up again. Now, there is a second use for this pot that matters even more than supper, and it is where the safety gets serious. The big version of the same pot, the pressure canner, was how a 1950s household put up a garden for the winter. And here the rule from the beginning of this video stops being about dinner and starts being about life and death. So, I am going to quote the canning authorities exactly and not soften one word of it, because this is the one place tradition gets no benefit of the doubt. Understand why canning is a different matter from supper. At supper, the food comes out hot and goes straight to the table. In canning, the food is sealed in a jar, put on a shelf, and opened months later, and whatever survived the heat has had all that time with no air to grow. The jar is a very small sealed world. What the heat did not kill gets the whole winter to itself. Low-acid foods, and that means vegetables, meat, poultry, fish, and soups, can carry the spores of the germ that causes botulism, a poison that grows in a sealed jar where there is no air. Those spores survive boiling water. 212 degrees does not kill them. The extension services say they need 240 to 250 degrees, and only a pressure canner reaches that. That temperature is reached at 10 to 15 pounds of pressure. With a weighted gauge, that is the 10-pound weight up to 1,000 feet above sea level, and the 15-pound weight above that. So the same rule, a lid that holds the steam, lifts the boiling point, which made the roast tender in an hour, is the rule that makes a jar of green beans safe to open in February. That is the second time you have seen it work. And notice why the altitude rule exists. Because it is the same physics again. The higher you live, the thinner the air, and the lower the temperature at which water boils. So a canner at 5,000 feet starts from a lower boiling point and needs more pressure, the 15-pound weight, to reach the same 240 degrees. The pot does not know where it is. The cook has to. One more line from the authorities, and then I will quiet down. Only recipes and times that the USDA has tested. Home-altered recipes have caused real outbreaks of botulism. A 1950s cook had her manual and her county extension office. A cook today has the same, and the numbers in it are printed for a reason. That is everything I will say as instruction in this whole video, and I said it because the alternative is unthinkable. We are about at the middle, and this is where I like to hear from you. Tell me in the comments which cooker sat in your mother's kitchen.